The Fractured Veil, Part 1. Chapter 1, The Whispers in the Dark. The wind howled through the towering spires of Ravenglen Keep, a restless cry that carried the weight of something unseen. The veil shimmered in the distance, a fractured wound in the fabric of the realm, pulsing with energy Moira could feel in her very bones. She had spent the night pacing the grand halls, unable to rest, unable to ignore the way the magic in the air felt wrong. The Unseelie court had begun to stir, whispers of old things waking, of ancient powers long buried now crawling toward the surface. She stood at the highest tower, her storm-gray eyes fixed on the jagged tear in the sky. It was growing. She could hear it now, voices. Soft at first, no more than a trickle, like the echo of a forgotten dream. But with every hour, they grew louder, clawing at the edges of her mind. A warning. A summons. A threat. Moira. The whisper slid along her skin, sending a shiver through her spine. She knew that voice, deep, commanding, laced with something ancient and cold. Ciaran. She turned just as he emerged from the shadows, his golden eyes filled with that same unspoken tension. He had felt it too. They all had. "It's getting worse," she murmured, gripping the stone railing to ground herself. Ciaran stepped beside her, his gaze locked on the shimmering tear in the veil. "The court is uneasy. The nobles have begun fortifying their keeps. They can feel something moving beyond the veil." His voice darkened. "Something hungry." Moira swallowed hard. Lasara knew this would happen. Ciaran's expression hardened at the mention of her name. The traitorous noble had vanished into the night after Moira's coronation, and no trace of her had been found since. But her presence lingered, like a wound festering beneath the surface. A distant howl rose from the depths of the Unseelie forest, a sound unlike any creature Moira had ever heard before. She clenched her fists. "It's time." Ciaran turned to her, brows furrowed. "For what?" She met his gaze, fire burning beneath her skin. "To cross the veil." His jaw tensed. "It's too dangerous. Waiting is more dangerous." She exhaled, pushing away the lingering unease curling in her chest. "We can't fight an enemy we don't understand. We have to see what lies beyond the rift. We have to know what's coming." For a long moment, Ciaran said nothing. Then, he reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Warmth. Strength. An unspoken promise. "We go together," he said. No hesitation. No doubt. Moira nodded, turning back to the fractured sky, where the darkness writhed and pulsed like something alive. Beyond the veil, something was waiting. And it had been waiting for her for a long, long time. Chapter 2, Crossing into Darkness. The night air thickened with the weight of magic as Moira and Ciaran stood at the edge of the veil, where the rift pulsed like a dying star. It wasn't simply a tear in the barrier between worlds, it was a wound, festering with an unnatural energy that twisted the very air around it. Moira's heartbeat matched the rhythm of the shadows, a steady thrum of anticipation and dread. Ciaran's grip tightened around her wrist, his golden eyes scanning the swirling vortex of darkness before them. "We don't know what's on the other side," he murmured, his voice rough. "It could be a trap." Moira exhaled. "It's already a trap. We just don't know who set it yet." Without waiting for another word, she stepped forward. The magic rippled, cold and biting, as she plunged through the veil. For a moment, the world turned inside out. Darkness swallowed her whole. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the kind that brought peace, but the kind that hummed with waiting, with expectation. The air here was thick with power, but it was wrong, too old, too deep, laced with something that should have been forgotten. The ground beneath her boots was smooth, almost polished, like black glass, reflecting a sky that had no stars, only an endless abyss of swirling void. Ciaran materialized beside her, his presence a beacon in the unnatural dark. He let out a slow breath, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. This place. Moira turned in a slow circle, scanning the landscape. Ruins stretched as far as the eye could see. Broken pillars carved with forgotten runes jutted from the ground like rib bones of a long-dead beast. Ancient structures, crumbling yet humming with latent power, stood in eerie silence. This was a city, she whispered. Once. Ciaran's jaw tightened. Then why does it feel like a grave? A whisper slid through the air, slithering through the cracks in the ruins. Moira. She stiffened. The voice was not her own, not Ciaran's, something else had been waiting for them. Ciaran was already moving, stepping in front of her, his golden eyes flashing. Show yourself. The shadows stirred. And then they took form. A figure emerged from the darkness, a woman, or what had once been one. Her form flickered between solid and ethereal, as if she were trapped between realms. Her eyes were hollow, yet they burned like embers. Moira's breath hitched. Who are you? The woman tilted her head. I am the past you have forgotten. And the future you cannot escape. The words coiled around her throat like a curse. Ciaran's grip on his sword was iron. Enough riddles. The woman's lips curled into something close to a smile, but there was no warmth in it. You seek answers, but you are not ready for them. Moira stepped forward. Then make me ready. The shadows shifted violently, as if the very realm rejected her demand. The figure flickered, her presence growing unstable. Find the ruins of Valdretha's keep, she rasped. There you will learn why the veil has fractured. Then, as quickly as she had come, she was gone. Silence settled once more, heavy and unrelenting. Moira turned to Ciaran, her pulse hammering. Valdretha's keep. His expression was unreadable. That name hasn't been spoken in centuries. A cold wind rushed through the ruins, carrying the scent of something old, something waiting. Moira exhaled, determination settling in her bones. The answers lay ahead. The darkness was not done with them yet. And neither was she. Chapter 3, Echoes of Valdretha's Keep. The journey to Valdretha's Keep was not one of miles, but of time, a trek through the past, through the echoes of an empire lost to the veil. Moira and Ciaran moved cautiously through the ruined city, their every step muffled by the unnatural quiet that pressed against them. The air was thick with memory, with something ancient and watchful. Do you feel it? Moira whispered, glancing at Ciaran. His golden eyes flicked toward her, sharp with awareness. The magic here is layered. Old. Twisted. He reached out, pressing his palm against a fragment of an ancient pillar, his expression tightening. Something bound this place in ways we don't understand. A chill ran through Moira. Bound. The word felt too fitting. The ruins stretched into the distance, each shadowed corner a reminder that this had once been a kingdom. Moira could almost hear ghosts of the past whispering as they moved deeper into the city, their voices curling through the broken archways and shattered towers. They passed carvings depicting creatures of both beauty and horror, fae with elongated limbs and hollowed eyes, their bodies half consumed by swirling darkness. Their expressions were frozen in agony, as if caught mid-scream. Ciaran studied the carvings with a hard expression. This wasn't a city. He exhaled, the weight of realization settling in his voice. This was a prison. Moira's fingers brushed the runes carved beneath the images, feeling the faded hum of long-dormant magic. What had been sealed here? And why did she feel as though it was waiting for her? The wind stirred, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and decay. Then, in the distance, a structure loomed through the fog. The castle had not crumbled like the city around it. It stood tall and impossibly untouched, its obsidian walls gleaming beneath the swirling, starless sky. It should not have survived the passage of time. A cold dread settled in Moira's chest. Why does it look preserved? Ciaran's expression darkened. Because it wasn't abandoned. Not completely. Moira swallowed, steeling herself as they approached the arched entrance. The great doors were ajar, their ancient wood splintered but still intact, as if waiting for something, or someone, to return. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature dropped. Ciaran followed close behind, his hand hovering near his sword. Something still lingers here. The great hall stretched before them, lined with towering pillars of black stone. A grand staircase spiraled into darkness, but what made Moira pause was the throne. It sat at the far end of the hall, carved from a single slab of midnight obsidian, its back adorned with sigils she didn't recognize. But it was the figure standing beside it that made her breath catch. A man, cloaked in robes of deepest violet, his face obscured by a hood. He turned toward them, his voice a soft rasp, yet it carried through the chamber as if whispered by the very walls. You should not have come. Moira's pulse thundered in her ears. The figure did not move from his place beside the throne, but she felt the weight of his presence, as if the very air bent around him. Who are you? She asked, her voice steady despite the ice creeping into her veins. The man tilted his head, shadows shifting around him. I am the last of the keepers. The guardian of what remains. Ciaran's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. What remains of what? The man's voice darkened. The barrier between realms. Moira's breath hitched. The veil. The keeper inclined his head, his hollow eyes seeming to pierce into her. You have felt its unraveling, have you not? The fracture grows. The balance shifts. She nodded, the memory of the whispers at the veil's edge pressing against her mind. What's causing it? For the first time, something like sorrow flickered in the keeper's tone. A force older than the Fae. Older than this realm. He stepped forward slightly, his form flickering like candlelight. And it is searching for you. A chill wrapped around Moira's spine. Why? The keeper did not answer immediately. Instead, he lifted his hand, and the shadows in the room pulled inward, forming an image in the air before them. Moira stiffened as she saw herself. Standing in a place she did not recognize, her crown heavy upon her head, her hands alight with power that did not feel entirely her own. Then, a voice, ancient and terrible, whispered through the vision. She is the key. And the lock. The vision shattered, plunging the room back into dim light. Moira's breath came fast. What does that mean? The keeper studied her for a long moment. It means the war is already upon us. Ciaran moved closer, his presence steady, protective. How do we stop it? The keeper's form flickered, his voice growing fainter. You cannot stop what has already begun. But you can choose the ending. Moira clenched her fists. She had fought to reclaim her throne. She had faced trials meant to break her. But this was something greater. Something darker. Ciaran turned to her, searching her face. Whatever this is, we face it together. She met his gaze, steady, unyielding. Together. The keeper gave a slow nod. Then prepare yourselves, Queen of the Unseelie. King of Shadows. His form began to fade, dissolving into the very darkness around them. But before he disappeared completely, his final words hung in the air like a curse. The gates are breaking. And soon, nothing will keep the monsters at bay. The last flicker of his presence vanished. And from deep within the keep, something stirred. Moira swallowed hard. The past had come back to haunt them. And the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 4, The Awakening of the Lost. The silence that followed the keeper's final words was suffocating. Moira stood frozen in the heart of Valdretha's keep, her mind reeling from the warning. The air was thick with unease, as if the very stones beneath her feet held their breath. Something stirred in the darkness. Something that had waited far too long. Ciaran's golden eyes burned in the dim light, his muscles tense. He turned slightly, positioning himself in front of her, his sword slipping free from its sheath. "We're not alone." Moira's pulse pounded against her ribs. No, they were not. The air crackled, and then the shadows moved. From the depths of the great hall, a sound unlike any Moira had ever heard rose through the keep, not a whisper, nor a scream, but something between the two, layered and distorted. The torches along the walls flickered violently, their light bending in unnatural directions. A shape emerged from the darkness. At first, it looked like a shadow cast by nothing. A void-given form, shifting, flickering, struggling to remain whole. And then, it took a step forward. Moira gasped. The figure was Fae, but twisted beyond recognition. Its body was wrapped in tattered robes of midnight, its face hidden beneath an ornate mask of cracked silver. But it was the eyes that sent ice crawling through her veins, they were hollow. Yet somehow, they saw everything. Ciaran moved instantly, stepping between her and the creature, his sword raised. "Who are you?" A voice, layered and fractured, whispered through the chamber. "The Keeper has spoken. The gates will break. And the lost will rise." Moira's throat tightened. The lost? The figure's head tilted, something unnatural twisting in its movement. "We were the first." The words hit her like a spell, rippling through her mind like shattered glass. Something ancient stirred within her. A memory she did not own. A story she did not know. The first what? Ciaran's magic coiled around him, dark and furious. "You were sealed away for a reason." The figure took another step forward, ignoring the blade at its chest. The shadows around it pulsed, shifting, feeding off something unseen. And now the seal is failing. Moira clenched her fists, feeling her own magic beginning to wake, rising to the surface like a tidal wave held back for too long. "What do you want?" The figure stilled. Then, slowly, it lifted a single hand. A pulse of dark energy shook the very foundations of the keep. Moira stumbled as the floor beneath them cracked, lines of glowing runes spreading like veins across the stone. The walls trembled, dust and debris cascading from above. Then, the doors of the keep burst open. A gust of freezing wind howled through the chamber, carrying with it the sound of whispers, thousands of them. And from the darkness beyond the threshold, more figures stepped through. Dozens. Hundreds. All wrapped in shadow. All watching. All waiting. Ciaran exhaled sharply. This is not a battle we can win here. Moira knew he was right. This was not a battle at all. This was a reckoning. She turned, summoning the power coiling within her. It roared in response, untamed, desperate. "Hold on," she breathed, grabbing Ciaran's arm. Then she let the magic consume them. The world blinked. And they vanished. They emerged at the edge of the ruined city, the taste of raw magic still heavy on Moira's tongue. Her vision blurred, her body burning from the inside out. Ciaran steadied her, his grip firm. "Are you all right?" She took a breath, pushing through the dizziness. "We need to get back to the court." Ciaran glanced back toward the keep, where shadows spilled into the city like a living plague. "They're coming," he said, his voice grim. Moira swallowed hard. The past had come back to haunt them. And the real war had just begun. Chapter 5, The Gathering Storm. The journey back to the Unseelie court was silent, save for the howling winds that tore through the twisted, lifeless trees that lined the ruined path. Moira's thoughts were a storm, turning over every word the shadowed figures had spoken, every whisper that still clung to the edges of her mind. Ciaran rode beside her, his expression dark, his golden eyes flickering with an emotion she rarely saw in him, uncertainty. They were waiting, she murmured, her breath barely forming words against the biting cold. They weren't just sealed away. They were trapped there. And now they're free. Ciaran's hands tightened around the reins of his steed. The keeper said they were the first. His voice was grave. That means they were before us, before the Fae ruled these lands. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind coiled in Moira's chest. If that was true, if something older than the Fae had been buried beyond the veil, who had sealed them away? And why? By the time they reached the Unseelie court, the halls of Ravenglen Keep were already stirring with unrest. Nobles gathered in tense whispers, their normally composed faces tight with fear. Something was happening. As soon as they dismounted, Lord Vareth, one of the elder Unseelie council members, approached, his long dark robes flowing behind him. "Your Majesty," he addressed Moira, bowing slightly before glancing between her and Ciaran. His eyes were sharp, knowing. "You felt it, didn't you?" Moira nodded. "What's happened?" Vareth exhaled, his silver hair catching in the torchlight. "The rift in the veil, it has grown. And it is no longer contained to the place where you entered." He gestured toward the great stained-glass windows that overlooked the kingdom. "There are fractures appearing everywhere." Moira turned sharply and strode toward the windows. Her breath caught. Across the vast expanse of the Unseelie lands, jagged slashes of darkness marred the sky. Each fracture bled with pulsing energy, like veins of raw magic splitting the world apart. The sight sent ice lacing down her spine. "This is happening faster than I thought." Ciaran moved beside her, his gaze dangerously cold. "And it's no accident." Moira tore her eyes from the sight and turned back to Vareth. "How long have these fractures been appearing?" "Only a day," he admitted. "But each hour, more of them form. And with them," he hesitated. "Creatures are emerging." Silence filled the hall. Moira clenched her fists. "Creatures?" Vareth nodded. "Not of our kind. Not of this world." Ciaran's voice was low, lethal. "They're coming through." Moira turned back toward the council chamber, her pulse hammering. The Unseelie court had always thrived in darkness, but this was different. This wasn't their darkness. This was something older, something worse. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "We need to track these creatures. See what they are, what they want." A new voice entered the conversation, smooth and edged with hidden daggers. "Then it is fortunate," Lasara said, stepping from the shadows, "that I already have." Moira stiffened, her magic flaring in response. Lasara, the noble who had tried to strip her of her claim to the throne. The woman who had vanished after the trials, only to return now, when chaos had begun to bloom. Ciaran's grip tightened at his side. "And why," he asked slowly, "should we trust you?" Lasara smirked, unfazed by his rage. "Because I have seen what is coming," she said, stepping forward, the dim light flickering against her porcelain skin. "And if you don't act now, this kingdom won't survive long enough for you to hate me." Moira met her gaze, storm-gray eyes clashing with emerald green. Lasara's words dripped with secrets, but there was truth in them too. Moira exhaled sharply. "Then start talking." Lasara's lips curled into a knowing smile. "The fractures aren't just doorways, they're summons." Moira's stomach twisted. "Summons?" Lasara nodded. "Something is calling them through. And they are answering." A deep unease coiled in Moira's gut. Who is calling them? Lasara tilted her head. That, she said, her voice quiet, is what you must discover. The room fell into silence. Ciaran exhaled, his jaw clenched. Then we start the hunt. Moira nodded, her hands tingling with unspent magic. We find these creatures. We learn what they are. Her storm-gray eyes flickered with determination, unshaken by the shadows gathering at the edges of their world. Because whatever had been summoned through the veil, whatever had answered the call, was only the beginning. Chapter 6, The Shadow Hunt. The moon hung low and lifeless over the Unseelie lands, casting silver streaks over the gathering storm. Beyond the towering walls of Ravenglen Keep, the fractures in the veil pulsed, like open wounds seeping darkness into the sky. And from them, something stirred. Moira stood at the heart of the war room, a map spread before her, its parchment glowing under flickering candlelight. Around her, the council gathered, wary, restless, and uncertain. Ciaran leaned over the table, his golden eyes tracking the newly reported fractures. If we don't act now, these breaches will reach the capital within days. Lord Vareth nodded grimly. And with them, whatever lies beyond. Lasara, standing at the edge of the chamber, smirked as she twirled a silver dagger between her fingers. Then perhaps we should stop talking and start hunting. Moira met her gaze, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. If you have something useful to contribute, say it. Lasara chuckled, unbothered. I do. These creatures, whatever they aren't just spilling through the veil at random. They are being summoned. A shiver passed through the room. Ciaran narrowed his eyes. By who? Lasara lifted a shoulder. That's the question, isn't it? Moira traced a finger over the map. 3 major fractures had formed in the last 24 hours. One near the eastern watchtowers, another deep within the Black Marrow woods, and the largest, dangerously close to the court itself. We split up, Moira decided. We investigate all 3 sites. Ciaran's expression darkened. It's too risky to separate. It's more dangerous to wait, Moira countered. We need to understand what we're fighting. Lasara grinned. I do love a good hunt. Moira exhaled and turned back to the council. Ciaran and I will take the eastern watchtowers. Vareth, you lead a squad into the Black Marrow woods. And Lasara. Lasara arched a brow, waiting. You take the western breach. Alone. For the first time, Lasara's smirk faltered. A dangerous game, Moira knew. But she had to test her. Lasara let out a slow, delighted laugh. Oh, you do know how to keep things interesting, Your Majesty. She slid her dagger back into its sheath. Very well. I'll bring you back something useful. Moira ignored the unease slithering through her veins. Hours later, Moira and Ciaran stood at the edge of the ruined watchtower, where the air was thick with decay and whispers curled through the night. The fracture was larger than they had anticipated. Blackened stone lay scattered across the ground, the once mighty structure split apart by unnatural force. Through the center of the ruin, the veil shimmered, a wound in reality, twisting and writhing. Ciaran's grip on his sword tightened. Something has been here. Moira stepped closer, her magic pulsing beneath her skin. The very air was wrong. Then, the shadows moved. A low, guttural growl rumbled from the darkness. Moira froze as something crawled from the fracture. It was not Fae. Not human. A creature half-formed from shadow and bone, its body shifting between solid and spectral, as if it did not fully belong in this world. It lifted its head, and its eyes were nothing but empty voids. A whisper of recognition crawled through Moira's mind. She had seen these things before. In her dreams. In the visions of the veil. Ciaran moved first. He lunged, his blade flashing in the darkness. The creature screeched, evading the strike with unnatural speed. Moira raised a hand, summoning her power. The shadows around her answered. A wave of energy ripped through the air, striking the creature and sending it reeling. But it did not fall. Instead, it turned its hollow gaze toward her and whispered. "We are coming." Then, it vanished, dissolving into the night. Ciaran cursed under his breath. They can speak. Moira's heart pounded. No, not just speak. They had a purpose. And now, they knew she was coming. The true hunt had just begun. Chapter 7, The Gathering of the Damned. The silence after the creature's parting words felt heavier than the night itself. Moira stood rigid, her breath short, heart still hammering from the encounter at the eastern watchtower. The unnatural thing that had emerged from the veil wasn't just some mindless entity. It spoke. It had a purpose. And it had warned them. Ciaran sheathed his sword with measured control, but his posture was stiff. "We should return to the court. The others need to hear this." Moira exhaled, dragging a hand through her tangled hair. "No. Not yet." Ciaran turned to her sharply. "Moira." She met his gaze, storm-gray eyes flickering with something deeper than determination. "They warned us because they wanted us to know. This isn't an invasion, it's a warning. That means we still have time." His jaw clenched. "And what do you propose we do with that time?" She turned her gaze back to the ruin before them, where the veil still pulsed like an open wound. "We find out who is calling them." They moved quickly through the ruins, shadows twisting with each flickering torchlight as they navigated the crumbling remnants of the once proud watchtower. The night was too still, as if the world was waiting. Moira could feel the weight of magic clawing at the edges of reality. It wasn't just the creatures beyond the veil, it was something else. Something older. Ciaran moved with her, his golden eyes constantly scanning, searching for threats. "If something is summoning them, it has to be close," he murmured. Moira nodded. Summoning magic requires a source, a tether. A gust of icy wind cut through the ruins, bringing with it a scent of decay. Then, a sound. A whispering chant, barely audible, carried on the wind. Not Fae. Not human. Something else. Moira's pulse quickened. "This way." They followed the sound through a collapsed corridor, the path narrowing until they reached what had once been a temple. Its pillars were crumbling, its once gilded walls now cracked and covered in ancient runes. At the center of the ruin stood a hooded figure. Their back was turned, but Moira could see the dark energy curling around them, pulsing in time with the fractured veil. The figure's hands were raised, moving in slow, deliberate patterns, weaving the magic that called forth the horrors from beyond. Ciaran's grip tightened on his blade. "They're summoning them." Moira took a step forward. Not for long. The figure stilled. Then, without turning, they spoke. "You should not have come." Their voice was neither male nor female, but something in between, echoing, layered, as if spoken through the mouths of many. Moira lifted her chin. "Then you should not have torn the veil." The figure laughed, a sound that was not entirely of this world. "The veil was always meant to break." Ciaran stepped beside her, his presence a shield of unwavering strength. "Who are you?" The figure finally turned. Their face was hidden beneath a mask of polished obsidian, carved with sigils that pulsed like veins of molten silver. Where their eyes should have been, only endless black voids stared back. "I am a herald," they said simply. Moira's stomach twisted. "A herald for what?" The figure tilted their head. "For the ones who were cast into the dark." She barely had time to process the words before the shadows around them erupted. Figures poured from the darkness, clawing their way into the temple, creatures like the one from before, half-formed, hollow-eyed, whispering things that should not exist. Moira's magic flared, her pulse a war drum in her chest. They had walked into a trap. Ciaran moved in an instant, his blade slicing through the nearest creature. But they did not fall easily. They dissolved, reformed, and attacked again. Moira thrust her hands forward, calling on her power. The shadows answered, tendrils of magic lashing out, and snaring the creatures. But it was like trying to hold smoke. The herald watched, unmoving, their mask unreadable. You fight against inevitability. Moira grit her teeth. Then let's see how inevitable you really are. She unleashed a surge of power, a shockwave that sent the creatures reeling. For a moment, just a moment, the magic faltered. Then the herald stepped into the blast. And absorbed it. Moira's breath hitched. Impossible. The herald chuckled, their voice smooth. You still do not understand, do you? They lifted a single hand, and the world shifted. A pulse of raw power erupted from the herald, sending Moira and Ciaran crashing into the ruined walls. Moira gasped, her vision swimming, her magic sputtering against whatever force the herald had wielded. Ciaran groaned beside her, pushing himself up, but before either of them could react, the herald was already walking away. The veil is breaking, they said, their voice almost gentle. And when it does, you will kneel before the ones who wait. With that, the shadows swallowed them whole. The creatures followed, vanishing like mist in the wind. And then, silence. Moira struggled to her feet, her breath ragged. Her mind spun. That power, the herald, what were they dealing with? Ciaran's gaze met hers, his golden eyes burning with the same question. This wasn't just a war. This was the beginning of the end. Chapter 8, The Unraveling Veil. The world had shifted beneath them, and Moira could feel it in the marrow of her bones. The herald had vanished, but their warning remained like a curse carved into the night. The veil was breaking, and they, the Unseelie, the Fae, the very balance of this world, stood at the precipice of something far worse than war. Moira stood beside Ciaran in the aftermath of the battle, the ruins of the watchtower looming behind them. A sky bruised with violet lightning crackled above, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath. Ciaran sheathed his sword, exhaling sharply. We need to get back to the court. Moira clenched her fists. No, his golden eyes flickered dangerously. No. We don't have time for politics or council debates. She turned toward the still-burning remnants of magic that the creatures had left behind, her storm-gray eyes sharp with realization. The veil is coming apart at the seams, and we need to know why. Ciaran studied her for a long moment before nodding. Then where do we start? Moira swallowed hard. We need to find someone who understands this magic. Someone who knows what came before. A shadow stirred behind them. Lysara emerged from the darkness, her emerald eyes gleaming with intrigue. Oh, how fortunate. I just might know where to start. The air in the Unseelie court was heavier than usual. A sense of unease had settled over the castle, like the hush before a storm. Word of the attack had already reached the nobles, and fear slithered through the halls like a living thing. Moira ignored their whispers as she, Ciaran, and Lysara strode into the vast library beneath Ravenglen Keep. The archives of the Unseelie were ancient, filled with knowledge hidden from even their own kind. At the far end of the chamber, a man sat beneath the glow of a flickering lantern. His silver hair was tied loosely, strands falling over his ink-stained hands as he pored over a tome older than most kingdoms. Ciaran's expression tightened. You brought us to him? The scholar, Valen Shadowmere, lifted his gaze, a slow smile curling across his lips. My. I haven't had such esteemed visitors in ages. Moira took a step forward. We need answers. Valen tilted his head, tapping his fingers against the brittle parchment. I assume this has something to do with the growing tears in reality? Lysara smirked. He knows. Moira exhaled sharply. Then tell us what you know. Valen leaned back in his chair, his piercing silver eyes assessing her. You seek knowledge that was never meant to be remembered, Your Majesty. Moira's patience frayed. And yet, here we are. Valen chuckled, standing with deliberate slowness. He turned to one of the towering bookshelves and ran his fingers along the spines of the tomes before pulling a single, dust-covered volume free. He placed it on the table and opened it to a page depicting the veil, not as it was now, but as it had been. A long time ago, he murmured, the veil was not a wall, it was a prison. The room grew colder. Moira's breath stilled. A prison for what? Valen met her gaze. For something that predates even the Fae. Something that should never wake. Moira stared at the ancient text, the inked drawings of darkened figures writhing against the barrier of the veil. Not creatures. Not demons. But something worse. The herald spoke of them, she whispered. They said we would kneel before the ones who wait. Valen turned the page, revealing an image that sent ice through Moira's veins. A Fae queen, her crown shattered, kneeling before shadows that had no form. Ciaran's voice was low. Who sealed them away? Valen exhaled. No one knows. But what is written here says that the veil was forged from a magic that did not belong to the Fae. A power even our kind was never meant to wield. Moira swallowed. Then why is it failing now? Valen hesitated. Because something is weakening it. Something from this world. A terrible realization settled in Moira's chest. The summons. Lysara, for once, looked solemn. Someone is breaking the veil from this side. Moira closed the book, her heartbeat a war drum in her ears. If the veil was a prison, and someone was tearing it down, then whoever had been trapped beyond it was about to be set free. And the world was not ready. Chapter 9, The Name of the Forgotten. A hush settled over the dimly lit archives of Ravenglen Keep, the weight of Valen's words pressing down like an iron hand. The veil was a prison, not a shield, and someone, was breaking it from within their own world. Moira inhaled deeply, steadying herself. If this magic wasn't meant for the Fae, then who created it? Valen's silver eyes flickered with a trace of something unreadable. He turned a page in the ancient tome, revealing an elaborate symbol etched in black ink, a sigil twisting upon itself in endless loops, unfamiliar to even Moira's well-trained eyes. Ciaran stepped closer, his golden gaze narrowing. That's not a Fae marking. No, Valen agreed. It predates the Fae entirely. And if my research is correct, this is the mark of the ones who first bound the darkness. Lysara, who had been listening in silence, let out a soft chuckle. Lovely. Another secret race of long-dead fools who thought they could play gods. Moira ignored her, focusing instead on Valen. What were they called? Valen hesitated. Then, softly, he whispered, the Nameless. The air in the library seemed to drop 10 degrees. Moira shivered, the name stirring something deep and primal within her magic. A warning. A memory long buried. The Nameless? Ciaran repeated, his tone wary. Valen exhaled. They were not Fae. They were not mortals. They were something else. And they vanished long before the first Fae ever set foot in this world. But their magic remains. The veil was their final act, their last warning to whatever came after. Lysara arched a brow. If they were so powerful, why did they disappear? Valen closed the book with a dull thud. Because the ones they imprisoned took them first. Moira's stomach tightened. If the Nameless were truly gone, then their knowledge, their weapons, were lost as well. Are there any traces of their magic left? She asked. Anything that might help us stop this? Valen gave a slow nod. Perhaps. But to find it, you will have to go where even the Unseelie do not tread. Moira lifted her chin. Where? Valen's gaze flickered with something close to regret. The ruins of Eldermire. Silence fell. Ciaran stiffened, his golden eyes flashing with rare unease. That place is cursed. Valen nodded solemnly. And yet, it is the only place where the Nameless left their mark. Lysara scoffed. Oh, wonderful. A lost city of dead beings who were devoured by something worse. What could possibly go wrong? Moira ignored the sarcasm, her mind already made up. We leave at first light. Ciaran turned to her, tension in his voice. Moira. We don't have time to waste, she cut in. If this is the only lead we have, we follow it. For a long moment, Ciaran said nothing. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. Fine. But we do this carefully. Moira met his gaze, a silent promise passing between them. They would face whatever lay beyond the veil together. Even if it cost them everything. Chapter 10, Into Eldermire. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of Eldermire, the once great city reduced to nothing more than crumbling ruins swallowed by time and shadows. The cold air carried whispers, not voices, but echoes of the past, fractured memories woven into the very stone. Moira stood at the entrance of the lost city, her breath curling in the freezing air as she took in the sight before her. The ruins pulsed with something ancient. Something wrong. Ciaran moved beside her, his golden eyes scanning their surroundings with a wary sharpness. This place feels cursed. Lysara let out a low, amused breath. That's because it is. Valen, trailing behind them, adjusted the strap of his satchel, his fingers dusted with ink from the tome he carried. The Nameless built this place as a refuge before it became their tomb. If anything of their knowledge remains, it will be buried deep within. Moira inhaled, steadying herself. Then we find it before the ones beyond the veil do. They moved carefully through the streets, each step kicking up centuries of dust and forgotten bones. The architecture was unlike anything Moira had seen before. Smooth black stone, twisting spires that curved unnaturally toward the sky, and walls adorned with symbols that shimmered faintly under the waning light. Then, the whispering began. Soft at first, curling through the ruins like the wind. Then sharper. Clearer. Moira stiffened, reaching instinctively for the dagger at her hip. Do you hear that? Ciaran's hand found. It's not just whispers. It's a warning, Valen murmured, his silver eyes narrowed as he ran his fingers over the runes carved into a fallen pillar. The Nameless left these behind as a last message. Lysara smirked. Care to share? Valen's jaw tightened. The locks weaken. The sleeper stirs. We were fools to think we could hold it. The prison will not last. A thick silence settled over them. Ciaran exhaled. Well, that's comforting. Moira's stomach twisted. The sleeper. The name pulsed in her mind, but it meant nothing, not yet. She turned to Valen. Where is the core of the city? If the Nameless left anything useful behind, it would be there. Valen pointed to the jagged remains of what had once been a great tower, half collapsed against the remains of a vast underground temple. There. That's where the Nameless made their final stand. Moira nodded. Then let's move. The entrance to the temple was barely intact, its stone doors shattered long ago. Moira ran her fingers over the cold stone as they stepped inside. The air grew thick with something ancient and waiting. As they moved deeper, the walls pulsed with faint veins of light, like old magic desperately clinging to life. The carvings told a story, one of desperation, of war, of something clawing its way into their world. Then Moira saw it. A massive circular door stood at the far end of the chamber, covered in the same twisting sigils as the book in Valen's possession. But what sent ice down her spine was the faint crack running through its center. Valen approached cautiously, pressing his hand against the stone. His voice was barely a whisper. "The lock is breaking." A pulse of cold magic shot through the chamber, rattling the air. And then, something moved. A shape peeled itself from the darkness, emerging from the edges of the chamber, where the shadows were too deep to be natural. It was not like the creatures that had emerged from the veil. It was worse. The figure stood impossibly tall, its limbs elongated, its skin stretched tight over unnatural bones. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, hollow black eyes locking onto them. It did not breathe. It did not move. Then, in a voice that did not belong in this world, it spoke. "You are too late." The torches in the temple snuffed out at once. Darkness swallowed them whole. And the sound of something vast and waking echoed from beyond the cracked gate. Moira reached for her magic, the weight of fate pressing against her bones. Whatever was beyond that gate, it was not meant to wake. But it already had. Chapter 11, The Guardian and the Sleeper. The chamber pulsed with ancient magic, a whispering hum that vibrated through the bones of the forgotten temple. Moira's breath caught as she stared at the monstrous figure before them, the guardian of the gate. Its elongated limbs, its hollow black eyes, the way it stood impossibly still yet exuded an overwhelming presence. It was something not born of this world. Beyond the cracked gate, a deeper presence stirred. A weight pressing against reality itself. Ciaran's fingers flexed around the hilt of his sword. "What is it?" Valen's voice was tight. "The last defense. And beyond it, the sleeper." Long before the first Fae courts were born, before the Unseelie and Seelie split the realms, there was a great war. The Nameless, the ancient beings who had sealed the veil, had faced something that should not have existed. A force beyond magic. A being that did not belong in this reality. The Sleeper. It had no form in the beginning, no face, no name. Only hunger. Only a need to consume. The Nameless called it the Sleeper not because it was passive, but because it waited. It did not devour everything in sight. It learned. It watched. It calculated. And then, when the Nameless thought themselves victorious, it struck. They tried to kill it. But the Sleeper could not be slain. Every wound closed. Every attempt to bind it failed. The only way to stop it was to contain it. So they forged the veil, not as a shield, but as a prison. And to guard this prison, they created the Guardian. The Guardian was once something else. A soul taken from the Nameless and reforged into something unrecognizable. A being stripped of identity, its existence bound to one command. Keep the Sleeper sealed. Keep the gate closed. For eons, the Guardian had stood, unmoving, untiring, watching over the last seal. Until now. The crack in the gate was not natural. Something, or someone, had weakened it from the outside. And now the Guardian had spoken the words that should never have been uttered. "You are too late." Moira's magic crackled around her fingers. If the Guardian was created to keep the Sleeper contained, why isn't it stopping us? Valen's expression darkened. Because the seal has already begun to fail. It is no longer protecting the gate, it is waiting. The Guardian shifted. A slow, unnatural tilt of its head, as if hearing something far beyond their comprehension. Then, it spoke again, its voice layered with echoes of the past. You stand before the end. The sleeper wakes. And when it rises, nothing will remain. A low, resonating sound rumbled through the chamber. The crack in the gate spread. And beyond it, something vast moved. A breath. A stirring. A presence pressing against the walls of its prison. Moira's heart slammed against her ribs. We have to stop this. We have to. The Guardian lifted its hand. The shadows twisted. And then the world collapsed into darkness.
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.